Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullah. Okay, see you again. So, and good day, everyone. What I'm going to explain to you today is about the lesson plan, the whole thing that throughout the semester, what you will be doing for under MAF201, that is the Cost and Management Accounting one. So basically there will be 5 topics altogether. The first one is contract costing. The second one is process costing. The third one will be marginal and absorption costing. The fourth one is the cost volume profit analysis, or CVP in short. And the fifth one will be budgeting. So these 5 topics will be covered in one semester of 14 weeks. But before I explain to you about the syllabus, I would like to explain to you and I would like to relate to you the whole spectrum of MAF. Okay, the whole spectrum of MAF. Basically, before you do MAF 201, okay, before you do MAF 201, you of course you have completed your MAF 151. Okay, what actually have you studied in your MAF 151? Okay, let us look at the lesson plan for your MAF 151, all right? So if you look here for your MAF 151, so you start off with your introduction to cost accounting. You look into the cost accounting system. So what basically is cost accounting? So you have looked into what basically is cost accounting, and then you go into into materials, into labor, and then you go into overhead. Okay, and then you go into activity-based costing, a little bit on activity-based costing, and then job and batch costing and service costing. So these are the topics that you have covered in your last semester or during your MAF 151. So I just want to give you some overview of what you have done and what you're going to do and what you during this semester, and how does it relates to your next MAF in the next semester. So basically for diploma, at diploma level, you will have 3 MAF. That is MAF 151, then you have your MAF 201, and then you have your MAF 251. So for your MAF 151, that is your introduction to cost accounting. So basically, what is cost accounting, right? So if you just Google what is cost accounting, so you can see here, cost accounting is a form of managerial accounting that aims to capture a company's total cost of production by assessing its variable and fixed costs. So I just Google it, and it's basically you are saying when you talk about the cost accounting, it comes from the word cost or costing. You look into the cost. You want to identify the cost of a certain product. Okay, before basically if you are a business, what's the main objective of you conducting a business? So the bottom line or the main objective of you conducting a business is because you want to have profit. At the end of the day, you want to have a profit. So my next question is, how do you determine the profit, or how do you calculate the profit? So a profit is basically the difference between how do you calculate your profit? Your total revenue and your total cost. So if let's say you have a pen, or let's say this one, a mouse that you have, so you want to sell this one. So how much is it that you want to sell it? So if let's say you want to sell it at 10 ringgit, so are you making a profit or a loss? Of course, you need to know how much is the cost of your product first. So if you sell it at 10, you need to identify your cost first. So if assuming that your cost now is 8 ringgit. So if you need to first determine your cost. So your cost is 8 ringgit, then I want to have a profit of 2, so I'm going to sell it at 10. So I'm going to so the difference between your total revenue and your total cost, the difference between your 10 and your 8 is 2. So 2 is your profit, as simple as that. So the main idea is that before you can sell your product, so you need to determine the cost. So what is cost accounting? So here we see cost accounting is a form of managerial accounting that aims to capture the company's total cost of production. So the keyword here is you want to identify the total cost of production. So the next question is, what includes in your cost? So what includes in your cost? There goes your element of cost. So you just Google the elements of cost. So elements of cost will consist of your material, labor, and expenses. So if you read further, each of these three elements can be direct and indirect. So you will have direct materials, you will have indirect materials. You can have direct labor, you can also have your indirect labor. Next, you can have your direct expenses and you can have your indirect expenses. So remember, you learn about the material, you learn about the labor, you learn about the expenses. So here, if you go, you just click any images. So this one I just Google, I just go to images, elements of cost. So hopefully you can see this one. I just go to this one. You can see material, labor and expenses, and this one you will have direct material, indirect material, direct labor, direct expenses and indirect expenses. Let's visit the page so that we can have a bigger picture of this. So you can see here, these are the elements of cost. So you will have three main elements of cost, because bear in mind, just now we are looking at cost accounting. So basically, what is cost accounting? Determination or ascertainment of cost. You want to determine how much is the cost of your product. If you want to know how much is your cost of a product, also remember, it also not only applies to product, it also applies to service. If you are providing a service, you are rendering a service, also you can use this one. Okay, but because products are more tangible, so in my example I'm going to use products, but bear in mind it also applies to service industries. Okay, back to this one, elements of cost. You will have your material, you will have your labor, you will have your expenses, and these can be further divided into direct and indirect. So you will have your material, you will have your direct material. So when you did your MAF151, you remember your cost structure before. The first topic then will be your material. You learn everything about the material, okay, because that's the first element in your cost. Okay, you remember your FIFO methods, first in first out, your LIFO methods, your last in first out, your weighted average method, and then you learn about the stock taking, you learn about all the stock level, you learn about the economic order quantity, all these things with regard to your materials. You learn everything in detail about your material. Okay, so what is basically direct cost and indirect cost? Hopefully you still remember, your direct cost is cost that can be directly traced to your final product, whereas your indirect cost, as the name implies, is the cost that cannot be directly traced to your final product. What do I mean by that? Okay, let's say you have this book, right? You have this book. Okay, this book is your final product. So if you are talking about the material will be the paper. So the paper will be your direct material in production of the book. Okay, what about the indirect material? So the indirect material will be the glue that you use uh, to glue this book together. So that is your indirect material. And then what about the labor? So labor, you have your direct labor, you have your indirect labor. So what is the direct labor? So direct labor will be the wages or the salaries that you pay to the workers that work directly in the production of the book. So that will be the direct labor. What about the indirect labor? For example, in a factory, you will have the security guard. So wages that you pay to the security guard will be your indirect labor. You can also have the cleaner. Wages that you pay to the cleaner will also be the indirect labor. So those that work directly in the production of the book will be your direct labor, whereas other than that, the wages that you pay to other than the direct workers will be your indirect labor. What about the expenses? So expenses is basically to come out with the book. Of course, you need the author. Okay, what does the author get when they produce when they write this book? So the author will get the royalty. So the royalty that you pay to the author will be the direct expenses. What about the indirect expenses? Okay, in the production of the book, you will also incur various other costs. So various other costs will be classified. For example, in the factory, do you need electricity? If you need the electricity, you have to pay for the bill. So if you have to pay for the bill, the cost of that electricity is called the indirect expenses. What about the machinery? For the machinery, you will have the wear and tear, the cost of usage of that machinery. The wear and tear or the cost of usage of that machinery is called depreciation. So depreciation is a cost to the company. So the depreciation cost falls under the indirect expenses. All other costs that you cannot dump it under material, you cannot dump it under labor, it is not your direct expenses. You call it as your indirect expenses here. Okay. So basically you will have all your direct costs. This one will be your direct material, this one will be your direct labor, this is your direct expenses, and all your indirect costs, your indirect material, your indirect labor, and indirect expenses is called your overhead. You see here, you have all the overheads, and that overheads can be the production or the non-production, such as your admin overhead, sales overhead, distribution overhead. Do you get it? So that is basically you learn about the elements of cost first. So if you look again at your syllabus, so here, if you look at your syllabus, of course, after you have learned about what is cost accounting, then you will have one whole topic on the materials. So you look into your materials. After that, you look into the second cost element, that is your labor. You look at how the labors are being paid, whether they will be paid based on time or whether they are being paid based on the output. Okay, you look at how the labors are being paid, the overtime, and so on. You look at the calculation of your labor. Next, why don't you have a specific topic on the expenses? Direct expenses is very direct, very easy, very easy, or because it is very not very simple, but it's very straightforward. Like the royalty that you pay to the author, so it's very straightforward. So you don't have you don't have a specific topic on that expenses. So all the indirect costs that I've mentioned just now falls under the category of your overhead. So that's why you will have another topic on its own on your overhead. So overhead is you look into if you can still remember, you learn about the overhead analysis sheet. You have all the direct allocation, you have the apportionment, you have the reapportionment, and you come across the word absorption or OAR. If you still remember your overhead absorption rate. Okay, you look into the detail of your overhead. That is the traditional way of doing it. Then you look into your activity-based costing. Again, activity-based costing is under the topic of overhead. So you look into how you assign your cost based on the activity. Okay, so why the name is activity-based costing? Because you want to cost your product. You want to determine how much is the cost of your product. But instead of using some other arbitrary basis, then you look into the activity, because that activity is the one that drives you to incur a certain cost. That's why the name is activity-based costing. That means you want to determine the cost of a certain product based on the activity. So you have learned about this activity-based costing. Okay, so that is basically looking at the elements of cost. You have learned that in your MAF201. So I stop here first, then I will explain further after this. Okay, with that, I thank you.